What about other kinds of applications for this technology? For example, medical imaging. X-rays today are kind of flat, not too much depth. They have devices which spin around the body and make little planes that a computer kind of assembles into a 3D form, kind of clunky to say the least. Does this have an application in that type of realm?
Potentially. We see a bunch of different applications. Some very interesting things for living with dignity for cameras as the population is aging and they want to stay in their homes, but you still want to make sure they're okay. And so doing things like predicting the probability of someone to fall. Well, you can actually train a physician to watch someone walking, and they can do a pretty good job after training of understanding the probability of this person to fall and get hurt. You can train cameras to do that. If I have this in three-dimensional space, I can train that camera to do this very well. And as we look at those kinds of applications, another space is the security markets. There's a lot of cameras in security markets. There's not a lot of people watching them, however, and so there's a lot of need for good automated security. And whether this is home, whether this is at the airport, whether this is in your parking lot, you need to know there's people, not cats, not raccoons, but maybe not raccoons, but people that are going to do something. And you have a problem with scale when you do these things. You have a problem with flashes of light or shadows fooling a legacy camera. When you have depth, you can pull this information out much easier. You can send much less data to be processed. And so you can spend more time on each frame with the part you care about. And as we extrapolate this out into applications like automotive, if we look at the automotive space, you see the Google cars riding up and down Highway 85 and all over the area here. So you see the trend is towards people starting to accept autonomous driving vehicles. You need a lot of information to do that because you're going to have about 30 years of autonomous driving vehicles and people driving vehicles on the road at the same time.
So these cameras could actually serve as sensors, judging speed and distance for oncoming cars, and instantly feed that back into a computer based in the car.
Right.
And tell you what to do, or unless the car is just doing all the driving itself.
Well, even if the car is doing all the driving itself, it really needs to know what's going on. It needs to know that there's a pothole and you steer around it. It needs to know that the data that was taken relative to GPS doesn't apply today because 2 of the lanes are closed. But also, as we look into the cabin, right? As we start looking into the cabin, I need to know where you are to have safer airbags. I need to know that you're paying attention to the road. A big problem right now is distracted driving. I want to be able to, hey, look back at the road, warn you, right? If I can do a three-dimensional model of your face and I can understand where you're looking, I can understand, oh, you're looking at your text, you're not looking out the
Well, you have
dash.
a computer that's figuring out if I'm looking off the road, basically.
Right. But the issue is by providing the depth information, it significantly reduces the processing and significantly increases the accuracy.
So some people have called this technology revolutionary. Do you see it that way? Do you think it's really going to make a big difference in how we live?
Oh, definitely, definitely. The potential here for this type of application in terms of assisting how people engage with the computerized world around them and how the computerized world can now start to do a better job of understanding your intention. You really need depth to start doing that very well because you don't want to spend most of the power of your computer on your camera and processing. You want to minimize that so that all the other things you're doing on that computing system or on that smart car or with that smartphone aren't burning a lot of power just to understand what you intend to do.
Now, what was the key breakthrough that made all this possible? Was it just that somebody came up with the idea that if you put 16 tiny cameras next to each other with 16 images slightly off, you could use software to assemble that into something very meaningful?
So actually there was a lot of work to come up with the 4x4 architecture. We've looked at 2x2 and 3x3, 4x4, 4x5, 5x5. And from a cost performance point of view, the 4x4 winds up being well for the application of your primary camera in your phone. Other architectures would be better for other instantiations. If you look back to how this all started, the fundamental camera in your smartphone, the silicon, the semiconductor, the model's somewhat broken. It doesn't follow Moore's law well anymore. It gets more expensive as you get smaller, much more expensive as you get smaller. If you think about it, the 13 megapixel camera in your smartphone, that's 1.1 micron pixels. That's the cutoff frequency for light in silicon. So we're talking about pixels that are now approaching the frequencies of light. And you have a lot of problems with that cause a lot of cost increases to be able to get good imagery. And so being able to step back and say, wait, you know, we look at what we did. We took a digital still camera design and we started banging on it and banging on it and banging on it till it got small enough to fit inside your phone. Well, that's not what nature did. What nature did was you have people have two large collection systems, just like a regular digital still camera. But if you look at small insects, things like that, they don't have two main eyes. They have many, many, many islets. And from that, they produce an image. Now, you're talking thousands or tens of thousands. Well, that's fine for an insect. But we still have to represent an image that a person can find pleasing. So thousands or tens of thousands doesn't make a lot of sense to us.
And I understand that the camera doesn't have any moving parts, so there's not much that could break.
Right. It is fixed focus, and it's focused from 10 centimeters to infinity. So what this means is we can capture the image much faster. Because as soon as the exposure level sets, which takes maybe about 3 frames, we're ready to capture images. If we look at the current system, the focus has to move until it finds the right focal point. We don't have to spend that time. So from power on to first shot, and then a shot over in the background and a shot in the foreground, we can capture them almost instantaneously.
Will this make photographers lazier? Right now they have to make an effort to focus. Now they could say, we don't have to bother focusing because the picture will be just perfect no matter what we do.
No, actually what I see is, you know, this is, as I said, this is focused on the consumer so that they can get what they meant to get out of the image. What I also see is this is going to really enhance what the photographer can do. It's going to make them much more efficient. Because even though you can do all of these kinds of things that we're showing here, it doesn't mean you will. You may still send these out to someone who has much more expertise in these kinds of things. There are much better tool sets to work with. So actually what I see is, from a work product perspective, it's actually enabling the professional photographers to be able to take it that much farther.
So do you see this pretty much replacing existing cameras, even among high-end professionals?
Potentially over the long term. I think in the short term, it's going to make it replace for the consumer level products and maybe an adjunct.
We have about 1 minute left. Any final thoughts for the audience?
So if you look at it, this is the first fundamental change to the camera architecture in hundreds of years. And we're doing a lot of changing here. We're doing a lot of disruption, but we're not disrupting the supply chain. We're working with the existing suppliers. We're working with the existing players. We're working with the existing manufacturers. What we're disrupting is how you interact with the image, how the systems can now work with the images better, how to make sure you get a more pleasing image.
Great. And I wish you all the best of luck with that. Thank you for being here. I've been speaking with Paul Gallagher from Pelican Imaging. Thank you for watching. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman, and we'll see you next time.